So I hope everyone had a great Yontif. Baruch Hashem, it's nice to be back. So let's learn a little bit. So this week's Parshas Breishis, we have, it's like jam-packed with good old stories. You know, there's a certain, there's a certain comfort level that you have when you read these parshas. You know what I'm saying? Like you go back to simplicity. God said, let there be light, these stories. So there's one particular story in the beginning of the parsha that we'll talk about for a few minutes, which is the story of Cain and Hevel. Cain and Hevel. We all know the famous story. It's one of the oldest stories in the book, Cain and Hevel. So Pasuk tells us that Cain and Hevel bring karbanos, they bring sacrifices to Hashem. Cain is a shepherd. He brings some of his sheep and some of his animals and so on as a sacrifice. That's Hevel. Cain is a farmer, and he brings some of his produce as a carbon. The Pasuk tells us that Hashem pays attention. Hashem receives the carbon of Hevel and not Cain. Cain becomes terribly depressed by this. Hashem tries to give him some chizik, words of encouragement. You can do it. Pick yourself out of it. Nothing's happening. The Pasuk tells us the next day, Cain and Hevel, something goes down between them. Cain kills Hevel, and the rest is history. Now, as a response to that event, of that murder, of Cain killing Hevel, so we know that generally the way Hashem runs the world is midah k'neged midah, right? Measure for measure. Whatever we do, Hashem responds in kind. So what is the reaction of Hashem to Cain? So Hashem punishes Cain with the following thing, of na v'na tiyeh ba'aretz, that as a punishment or as a response to the killing of his brother, Cain is sent into Golus. He's sent into exile, that he has to wander from place to place. Question number one, how is that midah k'neged midah? How is that measure for measure? Because Cain killed Hevel, therefore the response is that he has to now spend the rest of his life not being settled any particular place. How is that midah k'neged midah? That's number one. Number two, there was one person, in our people's history that was an expert in genealogy, in knowing where people come from. And I don't mean like using records. The Arizal was an expert in genealogy. The Arizal was able to look at you, know exactly where your neshama comes from, previous lives, future lives, all that stuff. The Arizal said the following thing. The Arizal said that Cain, that person Cain that killed Hevel, he would come back in his next life as Yisroi, the father-in-law of Moshe Rabbeinu. And said that Arizal, by Yisroi, sort of converting to become a Jew and accepting the authority of Moshe Rabbeinu, that was fixing his first mistake. The Arizal went further. He said Cain was a reincarnation, Yisro was a reincarnation of Cain, and Moshe was a reincarnation of Hevel. So the first time they didn't get along, and so for Cain to fix his mistake of killing Hevel, he had to be machni, had to humble himself before his son-in-law, Moshe Rabbeinu, who was in fact a reincarnation of Hevel. So the question is, what exactly is the connection between Cain and Yisro? How is the experiences of Yisro fixing the mistake of Cain? And a more general question, which I think is also important to ask, which is, what does it have to do with us? Every word of Torah, every story in Torah is telling us something about how to become better Jews right now. And so what do we learn from the story of Cain and Hevel? Hopefully we're far away from actual murder, from actually killing a brother. So what exactly was the mistake of Cain, and what do we learn? What does it teach us? Okay, so let's go back a little bit to the story. Right? Again, we all know the story. They both offer karbanos, both for sacrifices. Hashem accepts Hevel's, refuses to accept Cain. And again, as I said, and as a reaction to that, Cain falls into a deep depression, goes into a very dark place, and Hashem tries to get him out of it, nothing doing. So let's go back for a second. Why didn't Hashem accept Cain's carbon? Why not? So Rashi already asked this question. Rashi famously says, from Chazal already, Chazal say that one of the opinions of Chazal is that Hashem didn't have a problem necessarily with Cain, or even with the type of sacrifice he was offering. The problem was that Hevel brought the best quality animals that he had in his flocks, and Cain brought the leftover produce, the things that were getting a little moldy, the things that were a little bit old, not as perfect. So he didn't bring the best stuff. Okay, and that's why Hashem didn't accept Cain's carbon. Okay, fine. Now, once Hashem doesn't accept Cain's carbon, then it should be pretty obvious to Cain why not, right? So why does he fall into a deep depression from that? Like, it's pretty obvious. He didn't do you could have done better. He could have brought better stuff. So if the reason, let's again say like this, if the reason why Hashem doesn't accept Cain's carbon is something as simple as that, because he just didn't offer his best produce, Okay, then that's a pretty straightforward complaint Hashem could have against him. And so he learns his lesson. Okay, so next time when I bring a carbon, I'll bring my best produce. Grade A stuff. So why does he fall into depression? Why does he get depressed from that? This is not my question. It's one of the great, Rishonim, one of the great Jewish philosophers was Rabbi Yosef Elbo, the author of the Sefer Ikrim. He asked this question on Rashi. He says, if that's the reason, that again, he just didn't bring the grade A produce, then why is Cain thrown into a tizzy by this? Like, it's not such a big deal. So therefore, says the Sefer Ikrim a different shot. And this opens up for us a little bit the whole sugya of Cain and Hevel, what it means for us. He says like this, what was the reason, let's go back for a second, why did Cain bring produce, and why did Hevel bring animals? Or deeper, why did Hevel choose to be a cat on living, making a parnasa from sheep and cattle and things like that, being a rancher, whereas Cain decides to be a farmer? Like, what's the difference? So he says like this. He says between Cain and Hevel there was a very, very deep philosophical debate, and the debate was, what is a human being? What is a human being vis-a-vis related to animals? Are we just a higher species? A more sophisticated, more intellectual, more creative species? Are we just basically a more sophisticated monkey? Right? Or, no, we're not just a sophisticated monkey. Human being is something altogether different. Human being is created in the image of God. Altogether different. This was the debate that was between Cain and Hevel. Hevel was of the opinion that the human being is something special, something that's superior to animals. And because of that philosophy, therefore Hevel had no problem being a rancher and being a shepherd who's in control of animals and even eating meat. He had no problem with that because he saw the human being as something more chashuv than animals. The reason why Cain decided to be a farmer and to be involved in agriculture and produce and not to be in charge of animals, not to tell animals what to do and so on, was because philosophically Cain believed that animals and human beings are pretty much the same thing. We're just a little bit higher up in the food chain. But you can't say that we're altogether more special. And therefore, in Cain's worldview, taking an animal and sacrificing it to God, that's murder. That's murder. That's no different in Cain's worldview as killing another human being for the sake of heaven. Now, you don't do that. So this was a big machlokes between the 10. Now, when Hashem therefore accepted Hevel's sacrifice and not Cain's, what Hashem was telling Cain was that your entire philosophy is wrong. That's what Hashem was doing. What Hashem was telling Cain is that I don't have a problem that you didn't bring me this, the best apple. My problem is your entire perspective of what a human being is. That's my problem. Hashem said to Cain, a human being is not just a sophisticated animal. A human being is altogether something special, something altogether different. Your brother's right. That's what Rabbi Yosef Felbel says. That's what the Sefer Ikrim says. But here's the problem. Okay, so that at least gives us a bigger picture of what Cain and Hevel are debating about. But again, so why is Cain so upset by this? That's pretty good news, no? Like, well, you have two options over here. Either we walk around like we're higher developed cats, you know what I mean? More sophisticated monkeys, right? That's Cain's worldview, which is a pretty depressing and bleak way of looking at life. Or you have Hevel, which is that human beings are special, divine, infused with God's presence. I mean, altogether on a different level than other animals. And Hashem tells Cain, you're wrong. Your brother Hevel's right. Human beings, including you, are superior to everything in the world. They're the crowning jewel of all of creation. And because of that, Cain becomes completely depressed. That's good news. That's good news. What's the answer? The answer is that, of course, in a vacuum, hearing that you're special, that you're the crown and jewel of all creation, that you are the representation of God's presence in this world, of course that's great news. But here's the problem with Cain. Cain spent the last who knows how many years of his life writing PhDs and books and lecturing and going on tour, teaching the whole world how the human being is nothing more than a sophisticated monkey. It was a mistake. He was wrong, but he was entrenched in that already. To hear that he was wrong, even though in a vacuum what he was wrong about is actually good news, right? To hear that you're special, but he was so he was so caught up in his mistake by accepting this new revelation of Hashem, that Hevel is right. That means, in Cain's mind, it means that his entire life until this point was wrong. His entire life was wrong. His entire life was a mistake. Everything he taught, everything he thought, everything he said was based on a lie. And Cain could not bear that. Even though, again, in a vacuum, the new information that was presented to him by Hashem is good news. It's much better to realize that you're not just a sophisticated monkey. But to accept that means that everything I've done until now is an absolute mistake. And it was based on a mistake. And Cain couldn't deal with that. That's why even the name Cain, the Sfarim say the name Cain comes, the pasuk really indicates this, that the name Cain comes from the word kinyan. What does it mean, kinyan? It means to be acquired. We know the Gemara says in Brachas that a person's name, is very, very important to indicate what a person's tests in life are going to be. The test of Cain is, are you going to be owned by your mistake? That was his test. See, Hashem didn't hold it against him that he made that mistake. Okay. Hashem didn't have a problem with the fact that his entire life until then was based on an incorrect philosophy. People make mistakes. His nisayon was, the name Cain, are you going to be owned by that mistake? Is that mistake going to own you and not allow you to move further? And to say, you know what, I made a mistake, let's move on. There were two important words that Cain did not have in his vocabulary. And he desperately needed these two words. The two words are, in Hebrew, ma'abakach. So what? That's what Cain needed. Cain was just told his entire life was wrong. All of his books, his students, everything was wrong. What Cain needed what should his reaction have been? His reaction should have been, okay, I have two choices now. I could either sacrifice the rest of my life, and be stubbornly refuse to move past my past, pretty much. And I could be acquired and owned and stuck in my past, so much so that my future is going to be going down the drain. Or I can say, Ma'abakach, so what? So the past 50 years of my life has been wrong? Okay. I move on. I go on further. I take a left turn, I take a right turn, I change. I'm not going to allow my past to take down my future. Now the problem with Cain is that he refused to do that. Cain became completely depressed by this. The depression of Cain was not because, again, the information that he got was bad news. The information was good news. The depression of Cain was the realization of what that meant about his entire life until then. That's what got him down. And Hashem tells him, you could pick yourself up, just start again. So he made a mistake, you move on. Cain couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. And the truth is, and going forward, every time he looks at his brother, all his brother means to him is now just a reminder of how he's living a lie. That's all his brother means to him. And so he kills his brother simply out of a little bit of a self-defense, psychological self-defense. He can't handle it. He was completely owned by his past. He could not move further. Said that Rizal. And by the way, let's going back for a second. So Hashem punishes Cain with what? Navinat tia ba'aretz. Navinat tia ba'aretz. The exile of Cain. Whenever Hashem punishes, you have to understand the word punishment is a bad word. Hashem, the einish that Hashem gives to everyone is a tikkun. It's a way of fixing. It's always trying to fix the mistake. The reaction of navinat that you should be wandering the rest of your life was not a punishment for the murder. That was trying to teach Cain, it was trying to give him the tools to fix his problem. The problem of Cain was his stubborn refusal to move. His stubborn refusal to accept that maybe now in life I have to go left or to go right. A stubborn refusal to accept that until now I've been making a mistake and I have to move past it. And therefore Hashem teaches him that lesson by you spend the rest of your life always moving. Always moving. Never even allowing yourself to feel settled and to get entrenched in anything. Your time of being entrenched is done. You're now moving the rest of your life from place to place. You have no shita. You have no philosophy. You are whatever I tell you to be. That's Cain. The Rizal revealed that Cain comes back in the next life as Yisro. And Yisro's life fixes the mistake of Cain. Let's think about Yisro for a second. Who was Yisro? So we know Yisro was not Jewish, right? And eventually he converts to become a Jew, right? To become the father-in-law of Moshe Rabbeinu. But that story is not so simple. Who was Yisro as a guy? Chazal say something. Yisro was the Kohen Gadol of his religion. He was the Pope. He was the high priest of his religion. If there's anyone in the world, and then what happens? Then he hears, Mashmu Shalom. What did he hear? He hears a rumor. He hears something that in some distant country in Egypt, there's this slave tribe, and crazy things are happening. Crazy things are happening. Water's turning to blood. Oceans are splitting. Crazy things are happening. It seems that they have the truth. It seems that their religion is correct. It seems that they have the real God, and everything else is baloney. Now, people hear this. People even see it. If there's anyone in the world that had any excuse to just say, yeah, whatever, just rumors, or I don't know, whatever, go on to the next news cycle 24 hours later. If there's anyone that had the excuses to do that, was Cain. It was Yisro or Cain. Right? What is Yisro? Again, Yisro is the Pope. Yisro is the high priest. His entire life, he's preaching to his congregants. He's talking to his chevra about the truth of his religion, whatever that religion was. And he doesn't even see Yetzias Mitzrayim. He doesn't see the Jewish people. He hears about it. But Yisro has an unbelievable sensitivity to truth. And Yisro has two important words in his vocabulary, which is ma'abakach. So if I hear about Yetzias Mitzrayim, about the Exodus, and I believe what I'm hearing, and I allow myself to accept it, that means that my entire life until now, has been a complete lie. And everything I've preached, complete lie. All my books and chidushim, complete lie. And what's his reaction? Okay, it's been a lie, and I move on further, and I go on. That fixes the mistake of Cain. Whereas in the first life, Cain was stubbornly owned by his past. And he didn't allow himself to go on, because to go on meant to admit that he made the mistake and he couldn't handle that. Yisro, his whole life is admitting that it's a mistake. He admits that his whole life is a mistake, and that's his greatness. The word Cain means to be acquired. What does the word Yisro mean? Yisro means to add. It means to move. It means to not stay still. And it's an amazing thing. The Torah is given in what parsha? In the parsha of Yisro. Because if Hashem is going to give the Jewish people the Torah, it has to come with an understanding that there will be mistakes along the way. And Hashem gives the Torah not to angels, He gives the Torah to human beings. And a human being is a creature that's going to make mistakes. And the context within that the Torah is given in is the Parshas Yisro. It's that context of Hashem teaching us that you have to be willing to acknowledge you made a mistake, and don't be stuck by it. Move on. Have the confidence within yourself. Have the confidence within yourself that even if you made a mistake, that doesn't destroy who you are. That doesn't destroy who you are. It's what you do. You made a mistake, fine. Even if it's a lifelong mistake, it's been 60, 70 years that you've been living a mistake and preaching about it and writing books about it. I'll tell you, there's a famous Gemara. The Gemara talks about one of the Tanoim named Shimon HaMasuni. Heard of Shimon HaMasuni? He's not a famous person in Chazal, but it's an amazing person. The Gemara says about Shimon HaMasuni that every time he had a philosophy, he had a mahalach, he had yeshivas, and the style of learning in his yeshivas was that every time you see the word es in Chumash, right, the word es, Aleph Taf, which doesn't really have much translation, it's just like a filler word, he would darshan something. He would come up with a halacha from every es in Chumash. And that was his philosophy, that was his way of learning. Until he comes to one particular place of the word es, he doesn't know what to do. It says in Pasuk, es Hashem Elokecha tira, that you should fear God. What is he going to add to that? His style is, every time it says the word es, it's hinting to something else included. What could I include within the fear of God? Who else should I fear, that's on the same par as God himself? So it says the Gemara, as a reaction to this, it's a kasha, it's a good question. As a reaction to this, he closed his farm, shut down his yeshivas, finished. Everything I said is wrong. So the students asked him, Rabbi, because of one question? How many times do you get involved in a conversation? For 5 minutes, you're having an argument with a guy. The whole argument is 5 minutes long, right? And 4.5 minutes in, you realize you're wrong, But I just spent 4.5 minutes, you know what I mean? So I'm already stuck in this argument, you know what I mean? So I have to now, go on this whole charade of, continuing on this mistake that I know it's a mistake, but what am I going to do? Shimon HaMasuni spends his whole life darshaning every es. And he says to his students, yeah, just like I got reward for the drushes, I'm going to get reward for not darshaning. He wasn't stuck. He wasn't stuck. The Gemara says, came Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva had a solution to the kasha. He says, you know what the word es over there is including? The rabbi is talmidei chachamim. That just like you have to fear God, the word es includes a rabbi as well. You have to fear a rabbi like you fear God. So I remember from my Rosh Yeshiva, Zelig Epstein, right? You remember this word? He used to say that where did Rabbi Akiva get that idea from? Like, why did Shimon Masui not say it? Why did Rabbi Akiva say it? So he said Rabbi Akiva learned about how great a Talmid Chacham is by seeing the honesty of Shimon HaMasuni. Once he saw that Shimon HaMasuni was willing, like Yisrael, to say his entire life was wrong, and he moves on weiter, and he's not stuck by that. That's what a Talmid Chacham is. You can fear God like you fear a Talmid Chacham like you fear God. That's Rabbi Akiva. Let me end off with a quick Maisa. Maybe a few minutes before Mincha, I'll tell you a story. Again, the lesson of Kain Hevel, again, going back, this is the lesson of Kain Hevel. The lesson of Kain Hevel is not to be owned by your mistake. You make a mistake, listen, I mean, sometimes it could be a mistake between man and God, between man and man, in learning. Sometimes a person has a chavrusa or something, in yeshiva especially, you have a certain idea, eventually it turns out that you're wrong, but you don't want to admit it. You get stuck. We have to learn from Kain. You have to learn from Yisrael, learn from Shimon Masuni. You don't get stuck, you move on. Have the confidence in yourself that you could survive. You could survive a mistake. That's where it comes from. You have to believe that you can survive it. There's a mice they say about the Baal Shem Tov that there was an occasion where one of his grandchildren was getting married. Okay, so it was in some shtetl, not where the Baal Shem Tov was, a nearby shtetl. So a chassan is already a big deal. Ain't even called Baal Shem Tov, but on top of all that, the Baal Shem Tov himself was coming to be a Sara Kedusha. Okay, so that's an unbelievable thing. So the day of the chassan, the Baal Shem Tov comes with his whole entourage and everything. And in those days, the chassanas were not in like a wedding hall; they were outside near the rivers, usually the streams they would find. So fine, it's outside. And the Baal Shem Tov, this again, the whole town is there. The Rabbanim, everyone's there. The Baal Shem Tov is walking the chassan down, to the chuppah. And as he's walking down the chuppah, the Baal Shem Tov turns and he sees that along by the street, where there was a street over there. There's a horse and wagon that's driving by. Baal Shem Tov stops the procession in the middle, runs to the street, stops the carriage, runs over to the guy that's riding the carriage, whispers something in his ear, comes back to the procession, and finishes the chasana. Chassidim, like, what's going on over here? So they track down this guy, this wagon driver. He went to a hotel over there, so they track him down. They ask him, like, what's the mice? Like, what the Baal Shem Tov tell you? He said, the truth is that, it's a little bit uncomfortable for me to talk about, but whatever. They pushed him. This is the mice. He said, I come from a town, a few towns down, and the mice is like this. I had a good friend of mine. It was a neighbor of mine. This neighbor, he would, his parnasa, he made a not such a great parnasa, but his parnasa was, he was a malamed. So he would spend, 6 months out of the year traveling to a different place, teaching students, tutoring and so on. And then he would come back and he would have the money from that trip to pay up his debts and so on. So there's one particular time where he came back from his long, journey from about six months or so. And I came to his house just, to say hello, to welcome him back. And I noticed, and I went to the kitchen because I wanted to grab, a cup of water, whatever it is. And I noticed that right on the kitchen table is all the money that he just accumulated for the past 6 months. It's all just sitting there. And this person says, and I was thinking to myself, like, that's really irresponsible. It's really irresponsible. And I know this guy, and he's not so responsible to begin with. And he thought to himself, this is what the guy's telling the Baal Shem Tov students. I thought to myself, I'm going to teach him a lesson. Listen, we're friends anyway. So I'm going to take the money. I'll take the money, and he'll freak out a little bit, and I'll teach him a lesson how you have to be responsible. You can't just leave your wallet, around like that. So he takes the money, and whatever, one thing leads to another, and he steps out for a minute. His wife calls him to his house, whatever it is. He steps out to his house, and he gets caught up with something in his house. He forgets a little bit about the fact that he has the money in his wallet. Meanwhile, a half hour later, he hears screaming from the other, from his neighbor, because his wife. The neighbor realizes that the money's gone. His wife's neighbor, his neighbor's wife begins to freak out. All the neighbors are brought in to search the house up and down. I said, now he's like stuck. What do I do now? If I go and admit that I was the one that took the money, like, You know what I mean? It's bizyonis. So one thing leads to the next. One day goes by. He says to himself, okay, you know what? I'll find the right time. I'll find a good time to secretly put it back. He never finds the time. 1 day, 2 days, a week, a month, and it's like, you know, the debt collectors are coming knocking on the guy's door every day, and it's Rahmanis, he has them. What am I supposed to do? So one day the guy just decides, the ganef, whatever, decides, you know what? I can't deal with this anymore. I'm leaving. I'm getting my stuff together. I'm just packing out of town. I need to clear my mind. I can't handle this anymore. And he said, and that was the day that he just was wandering randomly, and he found himself in front of the wedding. And so what did Baal Shem Tov tell him? So he said that he told the students, Baal Shem Tov came to me, he said, he didn't ask me my name or anything like that, he just said the following thing to me. He said, you made a mistake, and you continue to make that mistake, but it's not too late. It's not too late. You can fix your mistake right now. Just go back, give the money back, everything will be okay. That's what he said. And he said, the Baal Shem Tov shook me up to my core, and that's what I'm going to do now. I'm heading back, and I'll just give the money, and I just trust it'll be okay. That's the story. The guy made a mistake. You don't get stuck by that. You move on. So Hashem should help that we should be zeicha to move on. We should be zeicha to move on. Hashem should help that we shouldn't make mistakes anymore. And if we have, we move on.
Thank you, Hashem.